Hey guys, what's going on? I'm wearing a dressing gown. My hair's all over the place. I don't even know how I put that. I don't remember putting this shirt on. I don't know where it came from. And we are going to be doing a reaction video to Old Guardian's video titled "The Numbers Are In. How did Warcraft Rumble do in its first month after launch?" This is basically a follow-up on the video that he did where he said, is Warcraft Rumble dying? He went into some of the app data. He talked about where it is in the charts, etc. And this is a video that is based on Sensor Tower data. Now, before we get into my thoughts on Sensor Tower, I do just want to say I think Old Guardian is a fantastic content creator. He's down to earth. He's not sensationalist. He's very analytical. He creates great free-to-play and talent sort of pay-to-win level content. And so, especially if you're looking for a PvE guide guy, he does practically every boss there is a guide for on his channel, and he does way more content than I could ever hope to do. I honestly don't know how he gets the time to do it. He's insane. And I also just love him because he's clearly from my kind of demographic. You know, I'm 32, I think I'm 32. Yeah, I was born in 1991, so I'm 32. And so he's obviously kind of in my age demographic somewhere. And it's just nice to see people from my age demographic doing content. You know, I'm not the kind of person that likes to watch sensationalist, sort of very loud, you know, and like I said on the podcast, if you guys haven't watched the podcast, by the way, I get why people watch XQC and iShowSpeed, and I can see it, but it's just not for me. It's just not the kind of content that I like, and they're probably perfectly okay with that, and I'm perfectly okay with that too. So I like the type of content that Old Guardian produces because it's very wholesome, it's very chilled, and it's just nice. It's just nice content. Anyway, let's get into this video. Now, he's using Sensor Tower. Now, Sensor Tower is probably one of the gold standards for mobile data in terms of estimates on the market, especially if, you know, you obviously won't have access to the same data that the developer gets. So Sensor Tower is about as good as you're going to get for estimating sort of how apps are performing. It obviously knows exactly where things are in the rankings. It can make pretty good estimations on downloads. But what I will say is that estimate is the key word here. Sensor Tower does have the tendency to get things wrong, and one of the biggest things that Sensor Tower tends to do is it tends to overestimate revenue. It tends to be quite generous on revenue. They often use statistical models for the most part to estimate how revenue is calculated on Sensor Tower. I know this because I work in games marketing. I've used Sensor Tower quite a lot, and I've seen data from Sensor Tower be wildly different to data that is actually true from the developer side of things. So they tend to be a bit generous on revenue. So just take a pinch of salt that the revenue figures that you see on Sensor Tower may not actually be the revenues, or may even be the other way, could actually be an underestimate. But in general, they tend to be a little bit generous on the revenue side of things. But what we're going to do is we are going to listen to Old Guardian. We're going to talk a little bit about what he says, and then we could sort of add my own opinion here. So we're going to get straight into it.
Guardian here. Warcraft Rumble was launched.
By the way, he starts every video where in his like Finnish accent, and he goes, "Old Guardian here," and I love it. It's just great. It's just like every video starts with that. I'm just like, I love that. I love that little phrase, "Old Guardian here." It's great. I just love it. I can't tell you. I need to have one of those guys. I need to have one of those things where it's like, "Excoundrel here," but I'm not Finnish and I'm just very British. But there you go. I used to say, "Thanks to G2A for sponsoring my channel," but they don't sponsor my channel anymore, so I can't say that.
1 month ago, so now it's a good time to check how did Rumble do in its first month. And
also, he sounds like Santa. Does anyone else think that? Sounds like if I put Old Guardian in a Santa hat and got him to talk to my children like that, they would think he's Santa. He's got that kind of I'm talking to you next to a fire voice, and it's just very wholesome.
because it was launched at the start of November and now it's December, we're able to see from Sensor Tower data the results from the previous month, because with a free Sensor Tower account you can see how all the games have been doing in the previous month, but nothing else really. So now we have November figures, and the November figures according to Sensor Tower for Rumble look like this. On iOS, Rumble had 2 million downloads and brought in $9 million in revenue, whereas on Android it had 3 million downloads and $7 million in revenue.
Didn't realize you're getting a recommendation for what I like to watch on YouTube. So if I hover over the next button, it's showing you what I watch on YouTube. And I don't know if have you guys ever watched this guy? It's completely off topic, but there is a guy, I don't even know the name of the channel because I've only ever watched the videos and I don't even subscribe because they just come up in my For You page all the time. But it's the was ex-duelist about to be ex-duelist from Yu-Gi-Oh! I absolutely love those videos. I know this is so off topic, but I can't stop watching them. I listen to them in the car when I'm driving. It's crazy. Anyway, back to the actual video.
For a total of 5 million downloads and $16 million in revenue. Well, is this good or is this bad? Let's take a look at some comparisons. The first point of comparison is naturally Blizzard's other because Diablo Immortal was actually like developed in China and Rumble was developed by Blizzard itself. But anyway, in its first month, Diablo Immortal was downloaded 10 million times and it earned 49 million. And this was also without China because the launch in China was delayed by a month. So these are perfect comparable numbers to Rumble. Rumble also has not been released in China. So Diablo Immortal was downloaded twice as much and it earned 3 times as much as Rumble. Yeah, that's not great news for Rumble. As for Diablo Immortal's current figures, in November 2023, Diablo Immortal was downloaded 200,000 times and it earned 7 million. So obviously Rumble was doing much better than that at least, but not kind of the same kind of launch hype.
So I want to just comment here because there's another game that I kind of want to show you guys. I will quickly bring it up. You've probably heard me talk about this game before, Command & Conquer Rivals. Now, before I talk about Diablo Immortal, I'll say Command & Conquer Rivals is from EA. It was from another franchise that was quite well loved in a similar demographic to Warcraft. And actually, in the first month, it absolutely fucking bombed. I mean, it really bombed. I mean, we are talking less. I think it had less than 500,000 downloads on all platforms, and the revenue must have been quite low as well. They pulled the plug on that game within a week. It really bombed. Now, admittedly, the hype for this game was awful. They did a launch trailer, they did all this stuff, and it was the most disliked video on YouTube. EA, and it was at a point where EA did not have great public sentiment, but people were expecting a new Command & Conquer PC game. I mean, it's exactly what happened to Blizzard. People were expecting a new PC game from Command & Conquer, and then they got this, and then they were really upset. But the game was great. Don't get me, the game was actually really good, but didn't have the good enough reception. And you can see that it is only in that 1 million to 5 million download category, and it has been out for 5 years. So this game hasn't really progressed past that launch period very well. And that's going to be what's telling for Warcraft Rumble, whether Warcraft Rumble just steadily grows from here, or we get the Command & Conquer Rivals treatment. But this game bombed, and in comparison, Warcraft Rumble actually did quite well. So we're going to go back to Diablo Immortal. I'll quickly just drop the this back a little bit. So Diablo Immortal was obviously the comparison in terms of a Blizzard product that Old Guardian was drawing here, and it was a product that, you know, I actually think was extremely good from just like a PvE perspective. I think Diablo Immortal is all round potentially a more powerful gaming experience on phone. There is way more PvE content. There's a lot more agency for what you want to do. You don't have to spend money to kind of enjoy it. It has a lot of stuff as well. You know, like Warcraft Rumble feels like there's not enough stuff to do. Diablo Immortal felt like there was too much to do. And it was extremely predatory and extremely egregious in money in terms of what you had to spend. To like get access, like some content was straight up gated behind money. You could not get access to it without money. That was the very high level legendary gems. Some of them you just literally could not access without spending. Obviously, you know, you occasionally got given a free, I can't remember what it was. I haven't played in ages, but you occasionally got given a free Rift token that allowed you to potentially get one of the legendary gems. But then those gems came in different sort of star values, and like there was an endless money pit that you could go down with Diablo Immortal if you wanted to chase like the very top levels. And they had a leaderboard ready to go. They had PvP. They had very end game PvE. The actual game that Diablo Immortal released as was much more complete, in my opinion, than Warcraft Rumble. And I think these figures are very telling. These figures tell you about how essentially release ready Diablo Immortal was. I don't think Warcraft Rumble was designed to be enjoyed at the same depth of Diablo Immortal. I think Warcraft Rumble was designed to be a casual mobile game. Diablo Immortal was quite honestly a pretty hardcore to mid-core mobile game. There's a lot of content there. It was basically Diablo 3 Lite, and some of the endgame stuff was even more exciting than what Diablo 3 had to offer. Some of the endgame stuff is frankly more exciting than what Diablo 4's got to offer. Diablo Immortal might actually have some of the best endgame content out of any of the Diablo titles. Whoever was developing Diablo Immortal clearly got it right. And that game received a lot of hate, but it clearly has done incredibly well and continues to do incredibly well. Just because I think overall it is a game that had a lot to do. There was a lot you could log on and there was always something to do. And like I said, I felt overwhelmed, like there was too much to do. But a lot of spending opportunities, a lot of ways for players to enjoy the game at their own pace, a lot of ways for players to explore PvE content where they don't have to feel pressured into PvP. And that's the problem with Warcraft Rumble, is like once you're past the campaign, like there's nothing to do. And that's why I think they need more modes in the game, pretty sharpish, because right now there's just not enough for players to do. There's no reason, unless you're playing PvP, for players to want to spend that much money. They're probably quite happy to just complete the campaign once. And I don't think Heroics offer enough. I don't think Heroics offer enough of a game-changing experience. Neither do Arclight Rumbles or whatever they're called. Neither do the Arclight challenges, because frankly it's the same bosses, just ever so slightly different. And that's the same with Heroics. You are just replaying the same bosses. So once you've completed the campaign once, I wouldn't be surprised if people complete the campaign and just don't log in again, because there isn't that much to do elsewhere. But anyway, regardless, Diablo Immortal was a much more complete and expansive game, and it was designed for you to spend more hours in the game. It wasn't designed as a casual game. And I think like the figures are pretty telling in terms of how they monetized it, and in general, the sort of a very long-standing hype that was built up to Diablo Immortal. Even though it received a lot of bad press, you'd heard about it, right? Even though Diablo Immortal generated a lot of bad PR, you'd heard about it. And that very old saying of any news is good news, it's kind of what Diablo Immortal played on. 10 million downloads in its first month, which is not actually that much more than what Warcraft Rumble had, but ultimately it was more enough that they got enough bigger spenders in it, and it was also without China involved as well. So, clearly a very successful launch, but I think like maybe indicative of the much bigger press campaign and the much bigger amount of marketing that was put behind Diablo Immortal, and B, just the money itself just shows you just how egregious Warcraft Rumble could have been, but it wasn't. Warcraft Rumble actually is not that egregious in terms of what you have to spend to enjoy it. But anyway, we'll move on. We've kind of covered that CNC Rivals and that Diablo Immortal point. But I think Command & Conquer Rivals is a better comparison. It was a game of a similar demographic, similar branding level, kind of. I think Warcraft's probably a bigger brand, but Command & Conquer Rivals was a very loved brand, especially in the early 2000s. Very similar game style. It was almost like a mobile RTS. It was kind of a Clash Royale style game, although I'd say that the Rivals had a lot more to it. Like Rivals allowed you to control your units specifically, and very similar monetization and leveling up units, etc. And it bombed, absolutely bombed. Warcraft Rumble did not bomb. Nowhere near. The Warcraft Rumble had I would say, relatively good launch. I would say maybe not as well as Blizzard would have liked. My gut take is that Blizzard probably would have liked more from it, but it's not bombed. And that's important.
Kind of launch hype. What about the original tower defense attack game, Clash Royale? In its first month, Clash Royale earned $133 million. Compared to that 16 million of Rumble, okay, that's a lot more. In November 2023, Clash Royale was downloaded 3 million times, compared to Rumble's 5 million, and Clash Royale earned 19 million, which is still more than Rumble's launch month of 16 million. And that's for a game that was released in 2016, so Clash Royale has really shown that it stands the test of time, and it just keeps earning money.
On that point from Clash Royale, I'll just quickly go back slightly. On that point from Clash Royale was the first in this genre, right? For the most part. Clash Royale kind of invented this genre. And generally when you're a first mover, especially in a free-to-play title, you capture the market audience, and it's very difficult for that market audience to move on. It's a classic example with Mobile Legends versus Wild Rift. Mobile Legends and to an extent Honor of Kings. Obviously, Honor of Kings is much more China focused, but Mobile Legends, especially in sort of that Southeast Asian market, that game came out before Wild Rift, years before Wild Rift, and it was kind of like the first mobile MOBA that was widely popular on mobile devices. Obviously, there was some outliers like Vainglory that was in that similar kind of era, but Mobile Legends was the dominant one. And just because Wild Rift released, and just because Wild Rift came from Riot, which is kind of like the original global MOBA, Wild Rift had a pretty meh first month. I actually think Wild Rift only earned 2 million in its first month, from what I remember. I have to go and have a look at the data, but I even think Wild Rift had a worse first month than Warcraft Rumble. And Wild Rift is, although has been, I would say, somewhat abandoned by the Riot global team. It has gone over to China. It has continued to find success and has continued to be developed 3 years later. Just last month, if you have a look at the download and the revenue figures, Wild Rift made quite a bit of money, mostly from China. China is really funding Wild Rift's continued development. But regardless, the game is still going, still getting regular updates, and still receiving all the love and attention you'd hope for from Riot. So, and it had a very abysmal Western launch. It didn't do very well. At least I know that, from Riot's perspective, I think they were hoping for a bit more. But Clash Royale was the first, right? And so Wild Rift couldn't. The point that I'm making is that Wild Rift couldn't take market share from Mobile Legends because of what I call the free-to-play conundrum. I actually wrote one of my marketing master's theses on this. But the free-to-play conundrum is that ever since free-to-play games have been released, new games have struggled, especially multiplayer games, especially free-to-play multiplayer games, have struggled to generate and build communities that are sustainable. And that is because these free-to-play titles that captured people between 5 and 10 years ago have essentially formed this addictive relationship with their consumers. The consumers have almost got sunk cost fallacy when it comes to free-to-play games. They have spent so much of their time, so much of their money, so much of their social effort in these free-to-play titles. Like if you go and have a look at most sort of regular League of Legends players who've played for over 10 years, and you get them to use that tool that looks at the spending on the lifetime of their account, many of them are in the thousands. Many of them do not want to give up League because or similar titles because they have just spent that much time in it. They may not even enjoy it the way that they used to. A new gaming experience might be the best thing for them, but they just don't feel like they can let it go because they have spent so much time and money and effort on the game. And that's why when you get a title that is broadly competing for similar audiences to an established free-to-play community, and it's no secret that if you look at the influencers that Blizzard was targeting for Warcraft Rumble, they were going after Clash Royale type audiences. People who played Clash Royale since it was released, in 2016, they're not going to be easily swayed to come over to Warcraft Rumble because they have got so much time, money, and effort spent in Clash Royale. Their accounts are maxed. They're a high rank. They're something. They are someone or something to their guild in Clash Royale or to the community in Clash Royale, and they're not just going to give that up. And even you have to be something truly special. Or the game itself, Clash Royale, has to go into some sort of catastrophic meltdown for you to kind of capture that same market audience. So, Warcraft Rumble has to build its own audience, has to build up from scratch. It can't, you can't just expect to capture market share from these free-to-play titles because it just doesn't happen that way, and it hasn't happened that way. And there's so many games that have struggled with this. I mean, just recently, Omega Strikers. I don't know if you guys have heard of that game. Omega Strikers was like this really hyped kind of anime-inspired football game. Free to play, similar model. I think it might have been cosmetic only to an extent. I didn't really play, but they didn't manage to build a sustainable multiplayer audience. And there was all those. There was the Paragon reworks that came out. There was 2 Paragon reworks that came out, dead in the water. And think about how much money went into developing those. There is not enough market share to get sustainable multiplayer communities built these days, and so therefore we're quite lucky to have Warcraft Rumble in the position that it's in because it's done okay in a market that's extremely competitive and in a market that is very difficult to survive in. Warcraft Rumble has somewhat landed on its feet, and that's a good thing.
Keeps earning money. I also looked into the general strategy mobile game market for November 2023, and
I'm going to skip over this part because he kind of just talks through the list. But what I want to say is that Pokemon Go, extremely casual, worldwide phenomenon. PUBG Mobile, one of the most played mobile games on the planet, massive in Southeast Asia and India, and sort of not, and actually that game almost no one plays in the Western market, but it still has like a really strong presence. Clash of Clans has had a massive resurgence. I don't even know what Ebony is, but I know that Ebony was not popular when it first released and has taken time to build up. So I'm fingers crossed that once Warcraft Rumble releases a load more content, that might be the way that it goes. But actually, you can see we're top 10 for November, and admittedly, it's launch month, and Old Guardian does say this. It is launch month, and launch months tend to be good because that's when you get the biggest peak of people playing, and then people drop off, and it's all about that user retention and kind of then trying to win back lapsed players with new content, and then trying to sort of keep the advertising effort going. But we beat Raid Shadow Legends, and I call that a win. So I'm just going to quickly go past it because this is just mostly talking about the list. I realize that I have been chatting for a very long time for what is a 6-minute video.
there. Because even while all developers obviously wish for a great launch, and great launch, lots of money pouring in is fun to have and useful to have for the continuation of the game, but a good launch is not decisive for a game's long-term success. For example, one of the highest earning games right now, Ebony, for example, it was not an instant hit. It just grew over time. Also, lifetime earnings are something completely different than just first month earnings. Clash Royale, for example, has earned more than $4 billion in its lifetime. So that is in some ways a positive sign, because Rumble is a similar game to Clash Royale, and Clash Royale has shown that the game is still going strong after 7 years. So this is a genre that has potential to succeed in the long term. So your first month doesn't dictate your overall success.
Yes, to an extent. I would say that is an optimistic viewpoint from Old Guardian, and that's why I like him. He's very measured and optimistic, in my opinion. Most mobile developers and most game developers will tell you that your first few months, or I think one of the Vainglory marketing directors, when I was working at Vainglory, told me that if a game doesn't succeed in its first 6 months, it's never going to succeed. Which is very interesting. I think Ebony is like, as Old Guardian said, Ebony is like an exception to the rule here. But many games that don't have successful launches do not go on to be successful. Like I said, Command & Conquer Rivals is a great example of that. Bombed, EA ditched it. It's still going, but it is a skeleton game. Never gets balance updates. The servers are just there to exist. And eventually, once monthly revenue starts to outstrip the cost of running the servers, then they'll just end up sunsetting it, essentially. By the way, whilst I was doing research on Command & Conquer Rivals, I saw that they're actually releasing a new Command & Conquer game, which looks awful. I can't wait for that. However, great point about Clash Royale, that these types of games are exciting. I will refer back to that point that I made previously, that Clash Royale is the first. It has captured a lot of the market. What Warcraft Rumble needs to do is either capture people entering the market now, or capture people like me who never really played Clash Royale, the older demographics that maybe didn't actually jump onto Clash Royale. I think Clash Royale sits in, Clash Royale's main demographic sits somewhere below me, or sort of around my age, down to about 20, 22, 23, something like that. Whereas I think there's actually quite a lot of Rumble players who are my age and up. So there's probably a good place to target those guys. But I imagine a lot of them are actually quite busy with World of Warcraft Season of Discovery. I know I am playing that a lot right now. But hey, there we go.
Also, if you compare Warcraft Rumble to mobile games that have not been successes, Warcraft Rumble is actually doing quite alright. For example, Supercell cancelled a game called Clash Quest. Clash Quest was live for 18 months, during which it earned 4 million. And Rumble earned 16 million in its first month, so okay, that's really not comparable. Then we have Clash Mini from Supercell. That's been slowly expanding in soft launch for the last 2 years, still hasn't quite found the formula. So while Rumble has not been a smash hit, it has not been a catastrophic failure by any means either. Obviously, as a content creator for Rumble and as a fan of Rumble, I really like playing Rumble a lot. I would wish that the game would succeed and do great and be like the most popular game in the world. That doesn't currently look like it's in the cards. So Rumble's launch has been probably mediocre, but it hasn't been bad. So it doesn't look like Rumble is in any sort of risk of being cancelled or just doing so worse that it would be dying. But we'll see what Blizzard can come up with in the coming months to make Rumble even better success. And next month will be really interesting to see, because the first month, of course, the launch month, there is a bit of hype generated. There is some additional income typically in the first month. Some games are able to progress from there and earn more in the coming months, but for most games, even for Clash Royale, the next months were much worse than the initial first month. But I'll let you know about that in 1 month's time, and meanwhile, I'm going to enjoy playing some Rumble.
And that's why I like Old Guardian. He doesn't care. He just likes the game, and he's making content because he just likes the game. And that is the most, I personally feel like that's the most admirable, because I'm not like that. That's the most admirable content creation quality. Just make content because you like the game. I think I'm more like that now, but I definitely didn't used to be like that. When a game started to struggle or my views started to dip, I just used to get so demotivated. I've tried not to be like that with Rumble. I've tried to say, well, Kieran, you have a full-time job now, mate, so make content, and if it does well, it does well. You don't have to make money from YouTube. And I think that taking that pressure off myself has helped me a little bit. I like some of these comparisons that Old Guardian made. Supercell is notorious for very swiftly canning games that haven't done well. There was that ridiculous game that I saw all the Supercell content creators getting super hyped about, which was kind of just like where these units ran at each other. I can't even remember what it was called. It was awful. And that got canned super quickly, so that obviously wasn't getting a lot of interest. There is a new Supercell game coming up that I'm actually quite interested to play called like Monster Hunting Company, something like that. Looks really good. I imagine that'll probably be one of the next games that does really well for Supercell. But Supercell have launched so many shitter games. Like Clash Mini is not exactly popping off. I mean, the thing about Clash Mini is very interesting. It's basically like, why would you have launched that game? It's just Clash Royale, to an extent. I mean, kind of to an extent, but yeah, yeah. Look, and I think this video has summed it up quite nicely. Warcraft Rumble had a mediocre launch. It had an okay launch. It did not take over the world by storm, but frankly, you've got a lot of gamers who probably are not interested in playing a pay-to-win Clash Royale type game in the Warcraft universe, especially from the audience that you're trying to appeal to. But it had an okay first month. I think it had a decent first month. I'm hoping that Blizzard will continue with their content schedule. I'd love to see them speed up and add some more things for people to do in the game. That's my biggest ask, because I just think there needs to be something more for people to log in for. Even now that I've got a lot of my leaders over 3k, I'm struggling to want to log in and play because I can't find PvP matches at 3k plus, and I'm just not that interested in progressing my dungeons past level 28 because I can't, and quests are just not very fun. So like there isn't actually really that much for me to do in the game right now. And I've played this game to death. But I still do it because I do like playing the game, and I especially really like the PvP. I would just love to be able to find matches more quickly, and for there to be more players in the 3k plus range. But there we go. Anyway, if you like this, I'll put all the links for Old Guardian in the description below, and I hope that you guys enjoyed this type of content. I like doing this type of content where I just kind of react. I know it's lazy, but it's fun. It just allows me to have open conversations and talk and just be a bit more podcasty, which is kind of what I like doing. And yeah, big credit to Old Guardian. Love the content he creates. I think he's super level-headed, super cool guy. And hope you guys go and support him too. I'll see you soon.